Howdy, it's Jim Arado. Wanted to show you a video I made. This was back, actually April 26th of 2019. We went through a little ride around Cades Cove in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We were staying at Berry Springs Lodge that particular weekend, which is just one of my favorite places to stay down in the Smoky Mountains area. Great little bed and breakfast. Actually, I'd say it's reasonably priced for what it is, but it's just a great place, perfectly located. It's maybe 2.5 miles from Dollywood, very close to everything else too. But it's also really secluded. Anyway, when you're down there, check it out. I'll probably mention more about that place later on. But we were staying at Berry Springs Lodge, and we'd heard several people mention that there had been some bear sightings down at Cades Cove. So we weren't really planning on going to Cades Cove on this trip, but we decided, we hadn't seen any bears in the wild, and that's something that kind of bothered me for years. I'd never seen bears in the wild. My friend Dave, who goes down to the Smoky Mountains a lot, he says he sees them every time he goes, but at that point I just hadn't seen a bear in the wild, and that really bothered me. So we thought, what the heck, let's go down to Cades Cove and see what we can see. Unfortunately, on this trip, we did not see a bear in the wild. We did take a nice scenic drive around Cades Cove, though. As you can see, that's what's playing. But we just didn't see any bears. So, but again, we had a good time. And actually, I want to say maybe a month or two after this, we would go back down to the Smoky Mountains, and we were having dinner at the Buckhorn Inn one evening, and that's another great bed and breakfast that if you're into bed and breakfasts, check that out. I believe Walt Disney actually stayed there when he was doing research for Davy Crockett, so that's some pretty cool history. But it's a nice bed and breakfast, and every evening they serve a 4-course dinner. And I think right now it's $40 a person for their dinner. And it's a really, really nice set down value, especially in the Gatlinburg area. Even if you go to a fast food place or one of the other dining kind of places, you're probably going to be paying $20 a person at least, for okay food. But some of the best meals I've had in my life have been at the Buckhorn Inn. So definitely check that out when you're down there. About a month or so after this trip, we went back down to the Great Smoky Mountains with my niece. My niece went with us, and it's her first night in that area, and we took her to the Buckhorn Inn for dinner. And one of the waiters comes in and says, "Hey, there's a bear outside." And I immediately said, "Hey, can we go look at him real quick?" And they very politely told me that, you can go look down this way. Make sure you stand at a certain spot, though, and you'll see the bear. So we all ran out real quick, and I finally got to see a bear in the wild at the Great Smoky Mountains on that evening. And here's my niece, on her very first trip to the Great Smoky Mountains, very first night, and she gets to see a bear in the wild. So I loved that moment. I didn't have a video camera with me at that time, but I did, I had my phone and I took some pictures. The pictures aren't that great. It's the kind of thing where you can see a shadow, you can kind of see where a bear's at, but it's probably comparable to a lot of the Bigfoot pictures out there. I can tell you there's a bear in the picture, and there is a bear in the picture, but if you look at it, you might go, yeah, whatever. But I did see a bear in the wild, and I was thrilled about that. And speaking of bears, I wanted to mention the great book. There's actually 2 books. Bear in the Back Seat. There's Bear in the Back Seat, and then the sequel, Bear in the Back Seat 2, by Kim Delosier and Carolyn Jordan. Kim Delosier is a former Smoky Mountain Great Smoky Mountain National Park ranger, and he wrote some stories about his experiences, mostly with bears, but with other animals too. There's some fun skunk stories, elk, and some other critters in there too. But it's mostly bears, and these are just some fun stories about his time working in the parks. As kind of a side note, I bought both copies of Bear in the Back Seat several years ago, and I let my dad borrow those books after I read them. I never thought of my dad as, he's not somebody that would talk Shakespeare with you, but, he liked to hunt. He was an outdoorsman, kind of a pioneer type. And I let him borrow those books, and he devoured them. He loved them. As far as I know, those are the only two books he ever read, but he loved those books. So anyway, I let him borrow those books, and he let another cousin of ours borrow them. And I just kind of thought, I'll never see my copies of Bear in the Back Seat again, but that's okay. My cousin has them. They're getting passed around in the family. They'll get some use out of them. They'll enjoy them. So on another trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, I found new copies of Bear in the Back Seat, and they were both signed. I think most of the visitor centers in the Smoky Mountains have copies of Bear in the Back Seat, and a lot of the gift shops have them too. And I found a couple of copies. I found a copy of each signed by Kim, and I grabbed them and happily paid full price for them. I was just happy to have new copies and happy to have signed copies. I like that kind of thing. So anyway, long story short, my dad, my late father, Leon, he passed away recently. And that's a story for another day. He was a great guy, loved the outdoors, loved animals, loved hunting and fishing. And we had a lot of good quality years with him. So I'm grateful for what I had time-wise with my dad. But after he passed away, I found the two copies of Bear in the Back Seat that I let him borrow, and that they'd found their way back to him from the cousin. And I'm glad to have those two copies now. I'm glad that I have those two copies that he read back in my collection. That means a lot to me. And I recently went back and reread those two copies. Again, they're good books. They're a fun read, and it was fun going back and reading the copies that I knew that my dad had read. But yeah, these two books are really good, and there's a few stories that really stick out to me as I read the books. Kim mentions that he's going out and he has to tranquilize a bear and try to relocate it. So he has this huge bear, and they call in a helicopter to come and pick him and the bear up, and he really doesn't have a cage or anything for it. And he sets this, knocked out bear in the back seat of a helicopter, and of course the helicopter pilot is, a little cautious of the situation. But Kim assures the pilot that, he's tranquilized, he's going to be okay, let's just get him out of here. Of course, the bear does come to during the ride, and that creates a great story. And another story that I liked quite a bit. I won't say that I liked it, but I appreciated it. Kim tells a story about an older bear that he had to euthanize, and it's kind of a Bambi-ish kind of story. He talks about how he feels doing it, and what it's like to have to do that, and why you have to do that. It's a very human story, and it was pretty big of Kim to tell that story. Another story that sticks out from that book is one where Kim talks about tranquilizing a bear before it climbs up a 50-foot tree. And of course there are visitors to the park watching Kim and all of his movements, wondering how he's going to handle this, and he's trying to act all calm and cool like he knows what's going on, but he really doesn't know what he's going to have to do. So there's stories like that in the book that really just kind of pop. There's good stories. Probably my favorite chapter in the books deals with a tame bear. that's found in the national park. There's a lady who literally a bear kind of comes up, and as I visualize this in my head, this bear is hugging her, and she's obviously freaking out and scared to death. Kim is on the scene, and they get the bear to let go of the lady, and they realize that this bear was obviously someone's pet that had been released into the park at a fairly popular stop in the park. And they realize, somebody, as it's become illegal to have pet bears, they thought maybe letting their pet bear go into the park would be a good thing to do. Well, of course, you have this bear who's never been in the wild before, and it's been totally dependent on humans for its food, and it thinks of humans as a food source and friendly. It just kind of goes up to another human and just hugs it. It's obviously having a little crisis, and it handles things the only way it knows how. Anyway, that I don't want to give away too much, because you should buy this book and read it, because it's just darn good. But that particular chapter ends up having a happy ending. And then another chapter that really sticks out. Kim talks about how there has only been one incident where a bear actually kills a visitor to the park. It's only happened once in the entire history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And this particular story is actually talked about in several books. I know I've read about it before, but of course there have been other scary moments with bears in the park, but there's only been one recorded incident where someone literally loses their life at the hands of a bear in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is a really impressive statistic when you think about it. So he does cover that in his book. A big theme of both of his books, though, is don't feed the bears. Bears really don't need to be around humans. It's not healthy for them. It's not good for them. They don't need to get dependent on human food sources. They need their plant-based, mostly, food that they get in the wild. They need that to survive. And when humans start to feed them and they start seeing humans as a source of food, that's just really bad news for the bears. They start going into neighborhoods, they start crossing roads, they start approaching humans. They might even start getting aggressive around humans looking for food. And he really stresses that feeding bears is a cruel act to the bears. I mean, you're really doing something mean to them when you feed bears. And he illustrates that vividly with his stories. So anyway, Bear in the Back Seat and Bear in the Back Seat 2, two great books that would be a fun read before going to this Great Smoky Mountains National Park, or a fun book to take with you to read while you're there, or a fun one to read after a visit. And it's the kind of book that a young reader or an older reader would appreciate. It's not difficult to read. Most of the chapters are just a few pages. Lots of good, quick, simple stories that are just a lot of fun. And I can't recommend that book enough. Also, kind of on a similar note, I recently got in the mail the latest issue of Smoky's Life magazine. And if you're not familiar with that, really probably any ranger at the park can tell you about it. I think the first time I heard about it was at the visitor center over by Klingman's Dome. I was talking to one of the rangers, and there's you can make, I think it's a $35 or $40 donation, and you get a membership into the Friends of the Smoky Mountains. Let's see. Well, you get a subscription to the Smoky's Life magazine, and you get a little membership card. You get a discount off at the visitor centers. There's some other perks too, but the magazine that they make, and I believe it comes out 4 times a year. It's just a spectacular magazine. It's oversized, it's colorful, and it's a magazine I look forward to getting when it comes into the mail. But there's lots of articles about stuff going on in the Smokies and the history. Um, Lots of good articles on the wildlife. And the latest issue that I got most recently has it has the fireflies on the cover, and it's a wraparound cover, and it's just a really colorful, kind of dark green and bright yellow cover showing fireflies at night in the park. And then it notes on the back that this issue's cover glows in the dark. For best success, either shine a flashlight or a UV light on the cover, or leave the magazine under a light for 10 minutes to half an hour, then turn off all the lights. Just as you would when viewing fireflies in the woods, allow time for your eyes to adjust to the darkness and surprise. I haven't tried that out yet myself, but it's just a really stunning cover, and I like what they did with it. I like the kind of gimmicky glow in the dark cover thing. I think that's pretty classy. Anyway, in this latest issue, kind of going along with the bear in the back seat theme, Smoky's Life magazine has an article about bears in the park and feeding them, and how that shortens their lifespan. And the article talks a lot about how they're using garbage containers in the park, around the park, even in Gatlinburg. They're using garbage containers where you put your, especially food related waste, into these containers, and they can only be opened by humans. Bears can't quite figure out how to get into them, and they've put up a lot of posters. And I know I've seen some of these. Basically, hey, dispose of your food, don't feed the bears, and I think that's a really good campaign. But there's a really good article in this issue of Smoky's Life, where they actually have some pictures, some older pictures from the park, tourist photos of people watching bears and kind of pulled over looking at them. And there's one picture that's kind of haunting. It's a picture that looks like it's probably from the 50s or 60s, and it's a man, and he's got a bag of potato chips, and he's trying to hand one to a fairly tame looking bear. And of course, back decades ago, I think it was kind of the thing to do. If you went to the Smokies, you'd try to feed the bears and get close to them and have some sort of interaction with them. And again, the park is encouraging not to have that kind of mentality these days. But this particular picture, it's just one of those, wow, what was that guy thinking kind of photos. So anyway, there's just some really interesting photos in this issue, and there's the good article about please don't feed the bears, and obviously some other articles, especially relating to the fireflies, the famous fireflies in the park, the synchronous fireflies that show up, I want to say around April, and they glow and kind of blink all at the same time. I've never seen that. It's I know they have a lottery now where you enter a lottery, and you if you get picked, you get to go and get a pass to go some evening and watch the fireflies. They kind of have to control how many people are there. But I think that's really cool. It's something I would like to check out one day. And I know that there's other ways to see them too. But I haven't looked into any of those means. But that's just another cool thing that the national park down there has going for it. Another thing about bears, while I'm on a bear kick at the moment, is I think it's the Gatlinburg Visitor Center, the little Great Smoky Mountains National Park Visitor Center. I think it's technically in Gatlinburg. I know as we're driving into the area, and we're right before you get to Gatlinburg on the right, there's the National Park Visitor Center right there. I know the trolleys come around and pick people up there. But there's that nice little visitor center, and inside that visitor center, they have a stuffed bear, a stuffed as in taxidermied, a bear that used to be alive and now it's no longer alive, but it's been fixed up and preserved, and it's in a glass case. And that particular bear was called Wishbone. It was a bear that had been seen around the area, and it kind of stuck out because it had kind of a white wishbone pattern on its chest. So, there were a lot of photos taken of Wishbone before he died, and well, long story short, if you go into that visitor center and see Wishbone, there's a little leaflet on his display case explaining how Wishbone had been killed by a vehicle on the road. So please don't speed in the national parks. That's kind of what that's about. But it's kind of sad to see Wishbone there. I'm glad, in an odd sort of way, I'm glad he's preserved, and I'm glad people can see him and read about what happened to him. Of course, it's a sad story and all, but it's also, well, there's Wishbone. So, also the park makes a stuffed, and stuffed is in plush, a cuddly stuffed animal kind of thing. They make a stuffed version of Wishbone that you can buy at the parks. And of course the proceeds help out the parks and what they're all about. So I think that's kind of cool. I like the fact that there's a little doll of Wishbone that you can buy, and that supports the parks. Yes, I did buy one. I thought that was pretty special, actually, so I picked one up myself. So anyway, something else I was thinking about as I'm watching us loop through Cades Cove were the wildfires back in 2016. We weren't there at the time, but I know we were driving up and down the road. I forget where we were going. We might have been going to Chattanooga, but we were close to the exit there off of 75, and I know we saw smoke, when the fires were kind of starting up and all that. It wasn't thick, but it was definitely noticeable, and you could smell it. And then it seemed like just a day or two later was when they had the big fire. And I remember watching on Facebook, there was, kind of a news conference kind of thing down there with the local news where they were talking about how, the whole area is on fire. And it was really sad. I mean, it was just, Gatlinburg and the Great Smoky Mountains, Pigeon Forge, that whole area, for a lot of us, I don't want to call it a second home, but it's a place that's just really, it's really nice. It's magical. I know my wife and I try to get down there at least twice a year, if not 3 times a year. And, our trips went from being a weekend trip to, I don't even want to go unless I can spend 3-4 days down there. I want quality time there when I go. And I know when we leave the area, it's kind of sad. We leave and we're talking about, well, when can we get back down here? So it's just a great area. I mean, all of it. And when you heard that the place had, was being torched like that, it was just really, really sad. And I was actually at work, and one of my coworkers had talked to, I don't know if it was a cop or a firefighter. They had an acquaintance in the area, and they had heard Gatlinburg was just burnt down, all of it. And my coworker came in and told me that, hey, the whole town is just gone. The whole strip is gone. And anyway, I invited him to sit and watch the little news thing that I was watching with me. And, you found out that there were some businesses in Gatlinburg that were gone. The Alamo restaurant is one that comes to mind. I know that's one that really took a hit. And there were a few others. Of course, I believe the last count was 14 lives lost. Obviously it was devastating, but it in some ways it wasn't as bad as it originally seemed like it was going to be. So still, it was sad hearing about all that. It was sad hearing about a place you love, um, having that happen. In Gatlinburg, like a lot of places to me, it's like Gatlinburg is my friend. Gatlinburg is a place that I love. I feel a connection to it almost like I do, with humans. And that, it's just really sad hearing about that. Oh yeah, there's the haunted house, not the Ripley's one, but the other one, the independent one. I can't think of the name of it right now, but I remember. I think they'd even put on Facebook, hey, it looks like our place had burned down. Thank you for supporting us and seeing us. They put a really friendly message up on Facebook, thanking people for their support over the years, because they had heard that that attraction had burned down. I think some of the early reports said it was gone. But then when people were able to get back into town, they saw that it was still there. So yeah, that was some craziness. And anyway, just kind of getting to my point here. After a little rambling, we were having dinner one night at the Buckhorn, and we talked to this great couple from Augusta, Georgia. Is a man and his wife, and they actually had some sort of a cabin or home in the Gatlinburg area that they were at when the fire started, and it was such a kind of a big crazy event to them. And getting a first-hand story, we were talking to this couple, and they were giving us their first-hand account of what they went through. Oh, and by the way, as I'm just as a side note here, I see we're looking at some turkeys. As we were driving around, we noticed some people taking pictures, and we were hoping they'd seen a bear, but they were getting pictures of turkeys, which is pretty cool. I grew up around turkeys, though, and it's always cool when you see wild turkeys, but I've seen a bunch of them, and yeah, they're turkeys. They're not bears. So anyway, but I did get a close up of some of those bears as we pulled into the visitor center there at Cades Cove. And by the way, I like that visitor center right there at Cades Cove. That's another great one. I know they've taken a lot of money from me as I've picked up my souvenirs over the years, but just a nice rest stop when you're driving around the loop there. I was also going to mention too, as we drive around, again, we were just looking for bears this day, and we didn't take any of the trails or anything else. We just drove the 11-mile loop. So anyway, that's what you're looking at as I'm babbling on. Back to this couple from Augusta, though. They were just this sweet little couple, and they're telling us their story about being in the area as the fire started. And they said they were in their house, and someone called and said, "Hey, the area's on fire. You might want to get out of there." And they said that they looked out their window, and there were flames everywhere. It was just like you saw in the videos, and I'm sure you've seen the other videos out there of the fires. They looked out their window, and there's just fire everywhere. So they went and got in their car as quickly as they could. They said they didn't even turn off the lights or lock their doors. They went and they got in their car and drove off. And as they drove off, they assumed that their cabin, their little cabin house that they had in the Gatlinburg area, they assumed it was just gone. They assumed that they would never go back to it. And they told us that fortunately, the fire spared this little, other home that they owned. They said there was some damage, but it wasn't nearly what they expected. So they were very fortunate in that respect. They did say it took about 2 years to get repairs done to their house, though, just because there were so many homes being rebuilt and in need of repairs. So So they had that. But they also said that their son lived in the area and his home was destroyed. So, and they also told me that as they drove away, it was just like, again, just like you saw in the videos, the famous videos from the fire. They're driving down the road and there's just fire on both sides of the road. And they're, hoping and praying that they'll get out of there unscathed. Which physically and all they did. So anyway, it was just really great hearing this little couple tell their story. I wish I'd got their name or got their contact information, but it was a treat talking to them and hearing their firsthand account. Plus, they were from Augusta, Georgia, and they had that wonderful, wonderful, authentic Southern Augusta, Georgia accent, and that was just fun. Hearing them talk. I remember the guy, the husband. We talked some baseball, and I told him we'd been down to Royston, Georgia, home of Ty Cobb, and the great little Ty Cobb Museum down there. And it was fun talking about Ty Cobb also. One of the fun baseball players to always talk about. So, anyway, as a side note of that, Ty Cobb donated a lot of money and kind of helped get a little hospital going down there. And I like to think Ty Cobb, though a man of his era, I think he had a lot of good in him that he doesn't get credit for. But that's something to talk about another day. So anyway, there's a interesting story about the Gatlinburg fires that I thought would be good to mention now. Yeah, also, as we're driving around Cades Cove and kind of looking around, I'm not going to go into the history of Cades Cove. You can look it up anywhere, Wikipedia. There's a lot of sites that give just a good, quick history of Cades Cove. Cherokee Indians, early settlers, etc., etc. I think Europeans started settling the area, I want to say around 1820. And this little area became somewhat populated, several hundred people shortly after that. I want to say up until the Civil War. There were some businesses and people, that sort of thing. You have the Civil War, and then later on, maybe 1920s, I could be off on that. You started having the government trying to get the land there, using eminent domain and that sort of thing to start up the national park. So you had families moving out, though I don't think there were a whole lot in the area at that time. But I think there were still a few families living in the area up through the 1930s. And I think you might have even still had a couple people living in some houses, maybe up through the 40s. And I want to say I've read somewhere that there was a church, one of the churches in the area was still functioning as a church up until the 1960s. And then, after that, basically the park took over and, established the park and set up shop, kicked people out. Again, that's a story for another day. There's plenty to read up on that of locals who lost their land as the government was setting the park up. So, but yeah, there's plenty of other places to read about Cades Cove. I think most people though go there and just drive the loop like we're doing, hoping to see some wild animals. I think that's the big draw. But there are the old buildings and that kind of stuff too, and it's just a good, pleasant drive when you're in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Also, the drive, I know if we're in Pigeon Forge and we drive out to Cades Cove, it's a pretty long drive and it's pretty twisty and turny, and the drive to get there is pretty exciting in its own right. And I know somewhere I've got video of us driving those roads. I might try to put something together with that one of these days. But those roads are, especially if you're going fast, they're a little scary. So drive slow on those roads and be careful. There's a lot of those kind of overhangs where you're driving and you're going around a curve, and there's part of a mountain sticking out almost into the road, and you've just got to be real careful to stay on your side and watch out for people coming around the curve and all that good stuff. Um, but yeah, Cades Cove is obviously, as you're watching the video, it's just a good, fun place to be at. Um, Something else I wanted to mention, as we're talking about the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, one of my favorite musicians to listen to when I'm in that area, and I like so many independent musicians. I like the underdogs. I like musicians that aren't on the map. But one thing that just seems right when we're in this area is listening to Dolly Parton. And I mean, she's A-list celebrity. She's a big deal, and but she gets a lot of credit, and all of that credit is so well deserved. She's such a good human, so charitable, and she's done so much for that area. Somewhere I saw a shirt that somebody had made up, and it said something about Saint Dolly, or the patron saint of the Smokies, and I thought that is so accurate. If there are saints, I mean, almost in a religious but secular kind of way, Dolly Parton should be a saint. Just a darn good human. And I've got a couple of friends that went to high school down there, and when they graduated, I need to ask them the exact story, but Dolly Parton actually gives you money when you graduate from the high schools to help you out. And they have a picture of them with Dolly Parton. I want to say she actually hands it to you when you graduate or something like that. But she's just done so much for the people and for that area. And and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but going back to the music, I think people forget how great of a musician she is. And I kind of rediscovered that as I got older. I remember being a little kid, and by little kid I mean like probably 3 or 4, and I remember her performing on TV, and it was something you'd watch. It was a big deal when she was on TV. And I remember my parents loving Dolly Parton, and I remember my older cousins loving Dolly Parton. And as I got older, I picked up her greatest hits, her 2 CD set. And man, those are just some really, really good songs. Really good, sincere songs that only a brilliant musician can do that. Obviously she's not playing crazy guitar solos or anything like that, but those are just some fun songs. And as we drive around the Smokies a lot, we're listening to Dolly Parton. It just seems right, and it that's music that came out of that area and really popped. So when we're in Eastern Tennessee, that's probably my favorite music to listen to. Oh, sorry about that. I had to refill my cup of water here. Yeah, Dolly Parton, though. I love Dolly Parton, and we've just worn out the couple CDs we have of hers. I really like that early song in her career, Dumb Blonde. Just a fun song. And Love is Like a Butterfly. That's just such a great song, and it's a sweet song too. And it's that's just one of my all-time favorite songs. I really like that one. But anybody have any suggestions about other? I mean, should I go out and buy a specific album of hers? Is there one that just really sums her up? I'd love to hear some suggestions on that. Also, anybody have any suggestions about other regional music? Other music that makes you think of the Great Smoky Mountains and Eastern Tennessee. I'm sure there's plenty of folk stuff out there, and probably some independent stuff. There was a little guy, and I can't think of his name. I bought his CD though. He was doing gospel songs out at the mill. I know I've seen him out there several times, but I did buy one of his CDs from him a couple of years ago, and it was pretty good. I mean, it was very lo-fi, very homemade, but it had a lot of heart, and I can't think of that guy's name right now. but I bought a CD and had him sign it and all that good stuff. Um, but I'm sure there's other people like him out there that have just made some good independent music. If you know of any, let me know. I'd like to hear about that. Um, I know there was a Smoky's Life magazine. It's probably a couple years old now. It's maybe from 2016, 2017, where they profiled some of the music makers, people that make like dulcimers and guitars in the region, and that was pretty cool. But yeah, I'd really like to know more about music in that area. I'll have to look that up in the near future. And speaking of Dolly, let me get back to Dolly again. Um, it's kind of funny that as much as we go down there, there's so many things in that area that everybody does that we haven't done yet. We've never been to Dollywood. I want to go at some point. I mean to go, but if I had a whole day to spend at Dollywood, I would have a whole day to, well, drive around the park some, or maybe spend some time in Cherokee or something along those lines. I definitely want to do it at some point, but I just haven't done it yet. My buddy Rick, his parents live in Middlesboro, and I believe they get season passes every year or something. They've invited us to go a time or two, and we just haven't done it yet. I do have a small knife collection, and my buddy Rick got me one of the little, logo knives from Dollywood, so I've got that, and I think that's pretty cool. But we just haven't been to Dollywood. We did go by the Dreammore Hotel, just for an hour or two one day. We stopped by there, and that was pretty cool. Um, I'm sorry, I was looking at the video there. It's obviously we're trying to zoom in and see some critters out there. I forget. Um, Man, we sure didn't get a very good shot of them, but we did see some animals at that point. Anyway, yeah, we did go by the Dreammore Hotel once and spent an hour or two there just kind of roaming around. Went to the gift shop, and they had a little coffee shop, and we got coffee there and just kind of looked around. It's a nice hotel, but it's a very family friendly hotel, which is cool. We don't have kids though, and especially the older we get, if there's a water park at a hotel, that's a hotel I'm gonna avoid. So a place like Berry Springs Lodge is definitely a place we really enjoy when we go down. But they the Dreammore Hotel, it was beautiful. They had some of Dolly's guitars and instruments up on the walls in cases. Yeah, but it's a neat place to go to, and I'm glad we stopped by there. I'd probably stay there, if I had a friend, if we went with a family that had kids or something. It would definitely be a place to consider. But it definitely looked like the kind of hotel where you would take the whole family. And I know when we go down to the Smoky Mountains, I want to stay somewhere relaxing and somewhere not rowdy. A place like Berry Springs Lodge, where it's more of a couple's kind of place. It's generally quiet, and there's not um, splashing in the water park kind of stuff going on. So, but yeah, it was cool going there. I bought some postcards to send to friends and family back home. I really liked getting postcards of Dolly's hotel. We had coffee. Like I said, we went into the gift shop, and they sold Dolly's book, and I asked if they had any signed copies. I figured that might be a good place to pick up, a signed copy of one of her books. I collect autographed books, and they didn't. I'm guessing she's probably a difficult autograph to get in a book in general. I haven't really checked, though. I need to check on that, because that would definitely be a book. I'd love to have an autographed book by Dolly for sure. But yeah, surely they're out there. But I thought that would be a good place to pick one up. But yeah. Anyway, like I said, we've never been to Dollywood, and that's just one of those things that I'm sure we will go there at some point. but if I've got a day to go spend at Dollywood, I've got a day to go drive around the park, or to go to Cherokee, or something like that. But I'm sure we'll go at some point. My buddy Rick, his family, they live in Middlesboro, and I know that they get season passes, and they've invited us before, and we'll take them up on that at some point. But we just haven't done that yet, and I want to. But yeah, we haven't been to Dollywood. There's other things in the area we haven't done that everybody likes to do. We've never we've never gone to a dinner show. We've never done a dinner show. In a decade and a half of going down to Gatlinburg a lot, we've never done one of the dinner shows, and we will. I would enjoy it. I'd like to do that, but we just haven't. And there's a couple down there that I kind of want to check out just because they look interesting. There's the Button Willow Civil War show that moved from a different area and moved up to Gatlinburg. And I think it's a two-person play. I don't think they do dinner, but it's a two-person play about the Civil War. And it's, from what I understand, very, very tilted. It's a very one-sided performance in favor of the South, and states' rights and that kind of thing. And I definitely would like to check it out, just because it's so novel. In a two-person play, that's got to be a pretty impressive feat in itself. I do know I actually called about going to see it once, and they don't perform on Saturdays for religious reasons. I forget the denomination, but the group doesn't perform their play on Saturdays, which is obviously, for an area like Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, that's odd not to be open up on a Saturday. I totally respect and understand the reasoning, but I would think Saturday would be your day to sell some seats and pay the rent and that sort of thing. But I want to check that out at some point. I just, that seems really interesting to me. I kind of want to go see the new pirate show too, just because, well, I like pirates. And there's the Stampede with the horses. Obviously we haven't seen any of them, but those are the three that I think would be fun to go check out just because. I know that they had a Dukes of Hazzard show some time ago. I don't think it lasted though, but I would have liked to have seen that too. So there's a few things down in that area we haven't checked out. And again, it always comes back to that's time we could spend at the park. That's time we could spend doing something else. So that's one of the main reasons we haven't done some of those things. But I'm sure we'll find time to do some of those in the near future. Another thing that I wanted to mention, while I'm mentioning just various stuff for almost no reason, something that kind of haunts me about the park, and I might get more into this later, but there's the unsolved disappearances that have happened in the park. If you read a lot of books, and there's actually about 4 or 5 interesting books out there on disappearances and deaths and tragedies in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. One of them that comes up in every single book you read, and again, I'll probably talk more about some of those later, and I don't think there's any sort of weird Bigfoot or UFO explanation for any of them, but they're still very strange. And one that kind of haunts me is the disappearance of Dennis Martin. Yeah, but it looks like I'm just about done with my video here. We're coming towards the end. I would have tried to have left some of the audio on from where we were driving around just because I like natural sounds and all. I did, actually, we were listening to Dolly that day, and I had the radio on kind of loud. And the way I've got the camera setting on the dashboard, it actually clicks a little bit more than I would have liked. There's a little clicking noise going on, and it gets pretty annoying if you're just watching this video straight through. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It was just a fun little drive around Cades Cove. I did get a little bit too much of the dashboard in at times, or the hood of the car, as I'm looking at that right there. But it's still, you get the experience of driving around the loop, and that was fun. So yeah, we had a good time. We had a running joke this day, I remember, of let's look for some real bears and not some real stumps, because like a lot of people, there have been times we've looked out in the woods and seen stumps and thought we were looking at bears. So that was a bit of a reoccurring joke and theme on this trip. But yeah, we didn't see any bears. We saw the deer, we saw the turkey, and that was worth the trip anyway. We had a good time, and I'm sure we'll do this loop again. We've done it before, and like I said, we finally did see a bear later on, but not this day. And anyway, my throat is getting dry, so I'm probably going to go ahead and just stop talking and let this video play out for a couple more minutes. And I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to get some more up, and thanks a lot.